Little did I realise at the time the important man he turned out to be. Seeing the plane, which appeared pretty low, I rushed out of the house, and the first thing I saw was the man in the parachute, who came slowly down to the earth, of whom I am very proud, and who looked after the German prisoners when he was with us, and looked after his comfort, and looked after my comfort very well.
Chip, if you do anything for this gentleman, I'll show he was a Jerry. He was a gentleman, but he didn't sit down when I took him in.
Deportation to Germany as slave labourers of over 1 million Poles, and in a program involving the murder of at least